Thank you guys for being here tonight. As you just saw, we are going to be talking about Daniel tonight. Obviously the first thing that comes to mind when we think about Daniel's story is Daniel in the lion's den. And we are certainly going to touch on that some tonight, but I really want to focus on kind of Daniel's life and Daniel's path that led him to that point, because believe it or not, I think we've all grown up with the story of Daniel. We've probably all seen the VeggieTales of Daniel, which I actually debated playing that tonight, but I guess we won't do that. I'll teach instead. But Daniel was actually 80 years old when he went into the lion's den. 80 years old. So there's a lot that happens prior to Daniel being thrown into the lion's den. So we're going to take a look at his life up to and through that time of his life. So just a little bit of background on Daniel as we get started. So Daniel is from the family line of David. So he is in that line leading up to Jesus. He was of Jewish nobility, so he was a Jewish elite. He lived in Jerusalem, so at the time, Israel and Judah were separate, were split. So he grew up in Judah, in Jerusalem, and he was taken captive by the Babylonians, because at the time that he was living in Jerusalem, the Israelites were rebelling against God. They were not following God very well at all. So God gave them over to the Babylonians. Daniel was taken captive, and the age range on when he was taken captive varies, but he was a teenager because the Babylonians would not take anybody that was over the age of 18 captives. They speculate that he was somewhere between 14 and 18 when he was taken captive by the Babylonians. He was taken captive with his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who we probably better know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they were all taken captive, all Jewish elites at the time. And the reason why they were taken captive by the Babylonians is because the Babylonians wanted to strip them of their Jewish heritage and assimilate them into Babylonian culture, which I think we know well enough from the story of Daniel, they do not do a very good job of that. But that was the plan. The plan was to strip them of their Jewish heritage, assimilate them into Babylonian culture, and make them productive members of Babylonian society, which was a pagan society. We start off Daniel in chapter 1. We're going to take a look at verses 17 through 21. And this is just after they have been captured, and they are kind of sitting in prison and kind of finding out that their lives and their culture are about to change. So Daniel 1, 17 through 21 says this. It says, "As for these four youths, God gave them learning and skill in all the literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in visions and dreams. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, and all of them, and among all of them, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians, all the enchanters that were in his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus." So as we start here, we find that God has provided Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah the ability to succeed in this Babylonian culture. But not just to succeed, he's given them the ability to succeed as followers of God. And this is really the only time that you see in Daniel that God is giving something of Daniel. This is what's really unique about Daniel, is you're going to find a theme of Daniel leaning on God, but not from a position of God, commanding or guiding him in a direction. It is Daniel whose faith is in God that is driving him to make the decisions that he makes throughout his life. So a little bit more background. as we look at this story, I want you to remember that Daniel is a Jewish elite, so he has a very, very, very in-depth knowledge of the Torah, of the first 5 books of the Bible. So he has a very, very probably memorized understanding of Old Testament Bible up to this point. So he has a very strong rooted faith in God. And as he has just arrived, he is already found to be elevated to the top. He is above every other that has been taken captive by the Babylonians, by Nebuchadnezzar, and has been brought to Babylon. And as it says, he will remain there until the first year of King Cyrus. So he will remain there his entire life. So he will live his entire life as an exiled Jew out of his home country. So I want to pick up a little bit of background on Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar, king in Babylon, wouldn't call him necessarily a ruthless king, like to the point we've heard a lot of stories probably about Roman emperors, Nero specifically being one of the worst, but very persecuting toward Christians. Now, Nebuchadnezzar wasn't very fond of the Israelites. I mean, he did conquer them after all, but he was a ruthless king in that nothing was going to get in the way of him accomplishing what he wanted to accomplish. And what he wanted to accomplish was being the most powerful king in the world. So he was not a nice guy. On top of that, I thought this was pretty important to note. He apparently was very short. So that might have added into the fact that, he was not always so nice and kind. But there was nothing that was going to get in the way of him accomplishing his goal. All right, and his goal was not to bring the God of the Israelites into his kingdom. That was not his goal. So as we pick up, I want to jump ahead a little bit to Daniel chapter 2. And so in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's had a dream. And in this dream, it's kind of created some fear in his mind that all of the goals that he is planning to accomplish in his life may not be attainable. It's made him question whether he is going to be the ultimate ruler that he has sought out to be his entire life. So he has brought in all of the magicians and all of the nobility within Babylon that are Babylonian to try and interpret this dream. And one of the ways that he has decided that he is going to be proven that the person that will interpret the dream to him will actually be interpreting the dream is they will not only tell him what the dream means, they will also tell him what he has dreamed without him first telling them what it is that he has dreamed. So his magicians and all of his nobility, they say, there is no man that can tell you what you have dreamed unless you first tell them. To which point, Nebuchadnezzar's, and this is where you get to see some of his ruthlessness, has commanded that all of his magicians and nobility should be killed. So at this point, this includes Daniel. So Daniel finds out, and Daniel's response to Nebuchadnezzar's command that everyone should be killed is this. And this is Daniel 2, verses 17 through 19. It says, "And Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. He told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision in the night, and Daniel blessed the God of heaven." So, big thing to take away here. And I want you to, this is a theme that's going to start to show up in all of these situations. It didn't say when Daniel found out that Nebuchadnezzar was seeking to kill him and his companions, it did not say that God told him, "Do not be afraid. This is what you shall do." It also does not say, because this is going to be my reaction when I hear that, is let's pack our stuff up and let's go. We're either going to die trying to get out of here, but we're not going to die sitting here waiting to die, right? And I think a lot of us can probably sympathize with that ideology. But his response is none of that. His response is pray. Reach out to God. He will give us the understanding. And part of that probably comes from the fact that to this point, he hasn't been let down. So when Daniel first comes to Babylon and he's sitting in prison awaiting what Nebuchadnezzar's plan is for them being taken captive, he is talking with the chief of all the prisoners, and the first part of the assimilation process is you're going to start consuming the food and the drink of the Babylonian people, which, if you know the Israelites, that would have brought some concern about some unclean animals. Daniel's suggestion to the chief of all the prisoners is, give us nothing but fruits and vegetables. You'll find that at the end of 10 days, we will be healthier than all of the other prisoners. Which, if you're thinking about it, I mean, this is not a call to be vegan. At the time especially, if you were just eating meats or fruits and vegetables and you didn't have any meat in your diet, you were not healthy. It was especially like you were considered healthy back in this time if you were overweight. Because if you were overweight, it meant that you had enough to eat, that you were wealthier, that you had everything that you needed, and you didn't necessarily have to be concerned with things like going out and hunting and killing your own food. So culture at the time would have said, consume, 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 because that is a sign of status and wealth. And Daniel tells the chief of all the prisoners, give us fruits and vegetables for nothing but that for 10 days. You'll see that we are healthier than everybody else at the end of these 10 days. And again, that health would be in the health of what their minds viewed health to be. And it was true. And again, it wasn't something that God came to Daniel and said, this is what you should do. Do not defile yourself with the customs of the Babylonian people. This was a decision that Daniel made based on the faith in his God and his trust in his God. So again, we see that here. We see that he has this faith and this trust that he's not going to run. He is not going to do any of the things that we would think he is completely justified in doing at this point, whether that be to run or to fight or to make sure that this demise does not fall upon him. His answer is to respond with faith in God that there is a way for him to bring God's word to this culture. And that's what he goes to do. We're going to pick up again with Daniel chapter 2, verses 46 through 48. So this is after Daniel has revealed the dream. So just as Nebuchadnezzar said, he wasn't going to tell his interpreter what he was dreaming so that he could then interpret it. Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar what he had dreamed and interpreted him that dream. This dream was not necessarily a favorable dream. It did not say that you are going to be the most powerful and wealthy ruler of all time and you're going to rule the entire world, which is what he wanted. This interpretation was that there would be kingdoms that follow Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, that his kingdom would fall and fail and others would replace it. So for somebody whose goal is to be the most powerful ruler in the world, that's not necessarily a favorable outcome. But Daniel does not sway from his faith that God will provide. So he after explaining all of these things to King Nebuchadnezzar, verse 46 in chapter 2 says this: Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and the chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. So one of the things that we see come from this is we see that through Daniel's faith, through Daniel's obedience to God really on his own, that he's prospered, that he has now been elevated. Now he doesn't get to go home. He doesn't get to go back to Jerusalem to be with his people. He is prospered in the situation that he's in. So just there is another dream that he interprets for Nebuchadnezzar, which is even worse than the first. In the second dream that he interprets for Nebuchadnezzar, he ends up revealing to Nebuchadnezzar that he is going to lose everything. He is going to lose his authority and rule in Babylon. He is going to lose his intelligence, and he is going to be, as it said, like a beast of the ground, and he is going to eat nothing but grass. Dew will fall upon his back, which means he's going to have no roof over his head. He will lose everything. And again, Daniel is, through revealing these things to this king who would not have, in a normal circumstance, been okay with somebody telling him these things, he has prospered. He is given authority over more. And the name of God is being recognized within this pagan society as being the God over every other god. Now, this is not to the point that he converts all the Babylonians, because the Babylonians still follow all of their other gods, but he is bringing the knowledge and the understanding of his God that he follows to all of these people, which is, remember, at the very beginning, when he comes into Babylon, the entire goal and the entire plan is to strip him of all of that and make him a Babylonian. And he has not compromised in any of it. He has not said, you know what, God, I think I should give in just this much, because they'll listen to me better if we compromise a little bit and I give in to their society and then they'll take from mine. He doesn't give in at all, which is ultimately what leads him to the lion's den. Because with this prospering that has happened, now everything comes to pass for Nebuchadnezzar. He loses his throne in Babylon. He is replaced by Belshazzar. And Belshazzar, again, elevates Daniel. Here's a guy who, Belshazzar is one of Nebuchadnezzar's children. Actually, I think he might be a grandchild, but he's in the family line of Nebuchadnezzar, so it passes to him the kingship. He is actually the last king of Babylon. He also has an interpretation from a writing on the wall that he needs Daniel to interpret for him, and that interpretation is Babylon's going to fall. And again, he's elevated. But Babylon falls. It ends up falling to the Medes and the Persians, and a Medo-Persian ruler kind of takes over, so a blending of those two cultures, and takes over the city of Babylon. And again, Daniel is elevated. Daniel is given authority over all. But of course, having this authority amongst these other men who are Babylonians and not Israelites, begin to take resentment against the fact that Daniel is being elevated over them. And this is what lands him in the lion's den. They conspire against him. They know the one thing that Daniel will not compromise on is following his God. So they use that against him when they go to the king at the time, who was King Cyrus at this time? I believe it was King Darius. It's King Darius at the time, and they go to him and they say, nobody should be greater than you, King Darius. Nobody's greater. Nobody should worship anyone but you. King Darius, that sounds great. That sounds great. But King Darius also is very fond of Daniel. And so they convince him to make this decree that no one is to worship anyone except for King Darius. And so what does Daniel do? Immediately when this has been said, he goes to worship his God. And they're waiting. And they catch him. And they take him to the king. And so we'll pick up Daniel with chapter 6, verses 10 through 16. And it says, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber. That's important. He wanted to be seen. Open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day, and he prayed and gave thanks before God as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man, except you, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored until sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, May your God whom you serve continually deliver you. So this is the story that we're all familiar with. And we know how this story ends. God shuts the mouths of the lions. Daniel is brought up out of the lion's den. King Darius praises the God of Daniel. And he takes those that set their hearts out to condemn Daniel, throws them in the lion's den, and immediately before they even touch the ground, they're consumed. So again, Daniel is 80 years old at the time he is cast into the lion's den. He's at the end of his life because they say somewhere between the age of 82 and 84 is when Daniel dies. Wouldn't it have been easier for him in this situation to just, you know what, I'm an old man. I don't need to be dealing with this at this stage of my life. Let me just live out the rest of my days in peace. I'm going to pray to my God, but I'm going to do it in a dark room, in secret, where nobody will see and nobody will know. Right? But not Daniel. He is one of the most faithful men of the Bible because everything that he does is through his leaning on God and not through direction and guidance and pushing from God. So what are the things that we can take away from this story? So the first thing that I take away is all of these things that happened to Daniel in exile. All right? As they say in Daniel chapter 6, that man who was exiled from Judah, he was faithful through not being able to be home his entire life in a foreign land amongst people that did not believe anything that he believed, right? That's hard. And the next thing that I think is, but Daniel was blessed. He lived a good life. He was elevated. He didn't have to worry about a whole lot. Things went well for him. But one thing that I find myself turning back to is, things went well. He was blessed. He was prospered by God for his faith in God. But it was never easy for him. Like every time he turned around, there was a more difficult decision that he had to make. It never got easier. It never got to the point, even at 80 years old, he's having to face, do I continue to publicly praise my God and face this punishment, or do I just be quiet at this point? But it's a decision that's obviously easy for him. It's not one that he questions. So that's another thing that I take away from Daniel's faith. The other thing that I take away is, yes, he was prospered, but for Daniel, it was never transactional. For Daniel, it was never, you know what, God, I will do these things for you in exchange for my prosperity. Don't send me to the lion's den. I'll do this for you. Don't make these bad things happen to me. Give me a good life for doing these things for you. And one thing I want to point you to, just to really hammer that one home is in Daniel chapter 5. So this is when he is interpreting a dream, or not, sorry, the writing for King Belshazzar. And King Belshazzar has said, hey, interpret this writing that no one can interpret for me, and I will give you these things. He said, scarlet robes and crown you with jewels. I will give you all of these things, which would essentially the robes in itself would have made him number 2 to the king. And Daniel responds with, he said this before the king, and this is Daniel chapter 5, verse 17. Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. I will still interpret for you what you have interpreted, but I don't want any of the things that you offer me. I don't want any more. In Daniel chapter 9, verses 16 through 19, and this is one of Daniel's visions, and he is praying to God for the Israelites. He says, O Lord, according to your righteous acts, let your anger and your wrath turn away from your city, Jerusalem, your holy hill, because of our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers. Jerusalem and your people have become a byword among all who are around us. Now, therefore, O God, listen to the prayer of your servant and to his pleas for mercy. And for your own sake, O Lord, make your face to shine upon your sanctuary, which is desolate. O my God, incline your ear to hear. For your eyes, open your eyes and see your desolations and the city that is called by your name. For we do not present our pleas before you because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, pay attention and act. Delay not for your own sake, O my God, because your city and your people are called by your name. So again, you see, and this kind of seems very different from everything that we're talking about within this story, but here you see Daniel pleading for his people who have been persecuted at this point. Babylon has taken over Jerusalem. They're being stripped of their heritage. They're being killed. And you don't see Daniel say, look at what I have done for you. Can you not, in exchange for what I've done, grant me something? You even see him throw himself in with the sinners. And he says, oh God, listen to the prayer of your servant and to his pleas. Incline your ear to hear, open your eyes to see your desolations and the city. We do not present our pleas before you because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy. Here's a guy who's lived in exile apart from his people, was probably one of the few faithful people to God in this time. He doesn't say, forgive them of their wickedness. He says, forgive us, right? So none of what Daniel has done throughout his entire life has been for his own prosperity. Another takeaway that I have from Daniel, and this is one that I try to put myself in the same boat. Even in his positions of power, there are times that it seems like his faith is the one thing getting in the way of him having more. Like he could have had a little bit more if he would have just left his faith out of it for just a minute, right? Specifically being in the lion's den. And I think about how often do I find myself in this predicament in my life where I know there's an opportunity for me to present my faith in a situation, but it feels like that could be the one thing that might get in the way of whether it be a friendship or being made fun of or whatever the case may be. How many times do I find myself in that position where if I just put my faith into a situation, especially being a teacher, there's a lot of times where I feel like I hold back maybe when I don't need to because, that might lead to me having a conversation with one of my bosses that maybe I don't want to have, that might make things a little bit more difficult. But every time Daniel is put in this position, it's almost like he doesn't even have to hesitate. It's almost like it's just instinct. It's just natural. And the last takeaway that I have is while he's in Babylon, because we kind of think about, okay, his life's pretty good. He's not like he's left in Jerusalem where things are really bad for all of the Israelites. He gets it. He gets a pretty good life. But I kind of also think about myself in that situation, like how hard must that have been to be prospered while everyone that you know is suffering? To be the one person who is given everything from your people, and your people are the ones being taken out of their homes, being forced to live a different way, being forced to do things and have life the way that they knew it stripped away from them. That had to have been something that was very hard and probably made him feel guilty at times. But again, it's not something like you don't see him beg God to take it away. You don't see him reaching out and saying, I can't do this. I can't handle it. He stays faithful. And he stays faithful without having the word of God being spoken into him on what the next step he should take. Which is why I consider Daniel one of the greatest men of faith in not just the Old Testament, but in all of Scripture. So as we break out, kind of what I want us to really dwell on tonight is how can we be a people that is of greater faith like Daniel, that when it comes to those situations that are difficult and they are hard and we find ourselves questioning, what should I do in this situation? Should I take a step and lean on my faith and speak my faith into those around me that may not believe? Or maybe it's just walking together with other believers and trying to grow each other in faith. How can we be more like Daniel? Because again, Daniel is living in a pagan society, nothing but pagans around him. Nobody that believes what he believes. And at no point do you ever hear about Daniel forsaking his faith to kind of assimilate or be a little bit more like or a little bit more welcomed by or a little bit more friendly with or just a little bit more accustomed to being around these different people. So I just would like for us to be able to spend some time thinking about that tonight and just what are some of the things that we can do to be able to have that faith like Daniel. So let me go ahead.